Tarisland launched recently, and honestly, it's one of the most captivating MMOs that I've ever played. It's extremely weird, not only in the way it came about, but also in its gameplay mechanics. If you've never heard of it, no worries. Tarisland is a newer MMORPG that feels like a mix between World of Warcraft and Lost Ark. I don't say that lightly. Dungeons and raids to PvP and leaderboard climbing, this game checks a lot of boxes, but it also comes with some unsuspected twists, both good and bad. In this video, I'm going to break down my first-hand experience with Tarisland and what it gets right and what it needs to improve on, and whether or not I think it's worth your time. Let's get into it. Before we get into the gameplay, there is a little bit of a backstory that people need to kind of understand about Tarisland. Back in 2023, Blizzard, creators of World of Warcraft and NetEase, one of China's biggest publishers, failed to renew their licensing deal. As a result, Blizzard had to pull most of its games from China, including WoW. Almost immediately after, Tarisland was announced, and let's just say it looked very familiar. People were skeptical, some called it a WoW clone, others thought it was just another cash grab. But after actually playing it, I can confidently say, you're right. But there are a few things that would be cool in other games that Tarisland already has. From the moment you start the game, you're introduced to the core elements, races, classes, and the main story. And yes, your first major challenge is picking a class. But here's the twist. Most classes are locked to specific races or gender. We all know one of those games, and usually they're kinda mid. You can't just make any combo you want, and it kinda sucks. That said, all the classes seem fairly balanced in PvE, so unless you're pushing competitive PvP, just pick what you think looks cool and roll with it. Once you jump into the tutorial, the story kicks off pretty fast. There's a character who's lost their memories, but has been blessed by something called the inscribed stone. It's the classic, you're powerful, but you don't know why setup. Throughout the game, you're guided by an elf priest named Jaya, who yells instructions and helps you navigate the world. And you quickly learn that something dark is infecting everything, twisting creatures and NPCs into stronger versions of themselves, but at a cost. The lore is intriguing, but I'll be honest, there's not a ton of depth yet. The game hints at bigger mysteries, but it doesn't fully explore them. Hopefully future updates will expand on that, but as of right now, you just kind of know there is a corruption, and you don't really know why that corruption is affecting you, or why you have your powers, or anything of that sort. You're just like, yeah, I'm fighting the corruption. Very similar to Lost Ark, I guess, where unless you really play it in depth, you're not going to understand what is happening at all. Now let's talk about the combat and the content a little bit. Once you hit a certain point, you unlock dungeons, raids, and PvP, and this is where the game really opens up. But one of the things that I love in this game is the dungeons. When you are playing the dungeons obviously you can queue with players or you can queue by yourself, and if you queue by yourself and you can't find other players, a really cool mechanic that I'd love to see implemented into other games is the ability that NPCs will join your dungeon so you can still potentially complete that dungeon if need be. Now, they don't really work in the higher tier dungeons, I will say that. In the higher tier dungeons, the NPCs, they tend to avoid everything. And what do I mean by that? I mean, oh, there's a mechanic where you have to share the damage. It's a mechanic where you have to use teamwork. The NPCs will dip. They will boot, scoot, and boogie straight out of there to make sure that they don't get anything. Same thing if there's one where it's like, take the circle away. They'll just run into you and explode your entire team, making the dungeon have to reset, redo the boss, or whatever. But in a lower tier dungeon in the beginning of the game where really nobody's ever playing those like ever again, it's a really good way to make sure you can do those quests, you can get those achievements, and you can still continue to enjoy that content if that's what you want to do. Raids, on the other hand, are a step up in complexity. The game helps provide full written guides inside the UI. Still though, I think they should take it further, as a short video of an animated example would go a long way, especially for newer players with more difficult mechanics, such as you need to stun the boss at this perfect pixel time, or you need to get to this area when the boss does this, or you'll just instantly wipe. I think a little short video like that would go a long way, and it would be pretty easy to implement as it is because they already have the full-on tutorial and guide system for the dungeons. The big thing that's bad about them right now is it's like when he does this move, avoid this mechanic, and you're not always going to know what that move looks like unless you've played the dungeon before or you've watched a video on the dungeon before. And I think that's kind of a weird expectation to always have your players watching videos about the game so that way they can play the game properly. I will say my biggest issue with raids is the toxicity behind raids. A lot of the times when you come into a raid in a game like World of Warcraft, Guild Wars 2, or Final Fantasy, if you say you're a new player, they're going to try their best to probably teach you the raid mechanics, and they already are accepting you and being like, okay, yeah, this guy is a new player, so we should, maybe baby him a little bit. Where in Tarisland, one of the big things I noticed a lot of the time was there was so many points where you would kick someone, restart, kick someone again, restart. And it all came down because the party leader or the raid leader just didn't want to explain the raid mechanic for maybe 2 seconds to one of the guys that is brand new to the game. So you see so many new players actually quit the game because the main aspect of the game is raids and dungeons. So imagine you're brand new to the game. You've never played it before. You're playing the lowest of the low tier raid. And while doing this, you mess up a mechanic one time. You still have better damage than everybody else. You still have better mechanics than everybody else. You still have better positioning than everybody else. But you mess up once and you just get kicked from the dungeon or the raid. I saw this happen so many times. Luckily for me, I play tank, and most people will not kick a tank player unless you're really, really bad. But when it comes to DPS, people will kick DPS like they're kicking rocks on the ground. Outside of that, the raids are pretty fun. There isn't a lot of mechanics behind them. It's usually you go in, you do a boss fight, and then that's it for the raid. So there isn't a lot to really know outside of the boss mechanics, which is a fair argument, especially if you are doing a very, very high-end version of the raid and then someone doesn't know the mechanics. Then I can actually understand maybe kicking someone then, because it's like, dude, we're doing top 200 players fighting the hardest boss in the game. I will say though, as someone who played a DPS and as someone who played a tank, these were pretty enjoyable, especially once you knew what the mechanics were to avoid, or the mechanics where you would do the most damage or be able to tank and really save your team. If you're not into raiding and maybe just doing boss battles though, there is a different system of PvP and Arcane Realms. One of the PvPs is fairly simple. You queue into this arena, and the arena is fairly large. It's a lot of players versus a lot of players, and you have to capture objectives. And while playing in this arena, the scaling is miserable. If you go in and you are facing people that play the game nonstop in this arena, because it's complete random queue, you will get absolutely mollywopped. And it doesn't matter about skill or anything like that. You could be the best player in the world, but these guys are the guys that don't stop playing the game, and gear really matters in Tarisland. So that is one downside to PvP as a overall. PvP is hard because the gear scaling is non-existent. Do they scale you a tiny bit? Yes, they do. But the scaling is so insignificant that you just get wrecked by people that have better stuff than you. I would love to see a different version of PvP where you actually fight people in similar gear score or similar level than you. I think it would just make it more fun. There was so many times where I would play the big battleground arena and the enemy team would come over and they would just spawn trap us, because you can just walk into the enemy team spawn and just infinitely keep them there. And there were so many times as well where my team would actively do the same thing, which made PvP extremely unenjoyable for basically people that weren't no-lifing the game. And that's just a miserable way to make a PvP in any game ever. Now, there is something else in the game that's called Arcane Realms. Arcane Realms are dungeons, but with unique mechanics. So basically, imagine you'd run a basic dungeon and their mechanics might be dodge this red circle, and that's what the mechanic would be. But when you run an Arcane Realm, it'd be like you still have to dodge that red circle, but now maybe there's a plant that spawns in, and if you don't destroy that plant in a certain amount of time, then the raid might wipe. These are great for getting gear. They're probably also the most fun thing in the game as well, as Arcane Realms really feel like the basics of playing an MMO. You're running dungeons, you're getting gear, you're leveling up if you need to level up, you're doing everything in a MMO that feels like an MMO. And Arcane Realms, for a long time, at least for me, carried me through the hours of playing this game. It's kind of sad. If one thing is carrying your population through playing the game outside of raids, the game is getting pretty rough at that point. It's not saying that the individual stuff in the game is bad, it's just there's such a lack of everything that's in the game that makes it very boring after a point in time. The best way I could put it is, imagine if you were playing World of Warcraft, Guild Wars 2, or Final Fantasy 14, and the only thing you did every day was craft. And that was the only thing that was valuable to do in the game, because anything outside of that would be a waste of time. What overall is good and bad in Tarisland? First off, I enjoy the overall questline. The overall questline is pretty solid. I think it's a good concept. It's very similar to Lost Ark. I enjoyed that questline, and a lot of the small end voice acting is pretty good as well. The game also looks great, and it runs smooth. I don't have the best computer ever, so it running smooth is a massive W, because I've played plenty of games where I can't even stream it, I can't do anything with it, it just automatically crashes. Class balance in PvE is pretty good. Is there better classes than others? Yes, 100%. But alongside that, you can really play whatever you like, and you can still do really, really well. You just might not be the top 1% if you aren't playing it absolute meta. But that really goes for any game. I absolutely love the NPC dungeon system, where you queue in for a dungeon, it can't find anybody, and they give you NPCs to play with you. People will complain about this system, but I think it keeps the early dungeons relevant, because obviously it's hard to find players for early dungeons, but if you can get NPCs in there, you can still run the dungeon, you can still enjoy it, and it's overall pretty good. I think as AI gets a little bit more advanced, I'd love to see this system in more games, because it truly is a one-of-a-kind thing that really helps the game. Obviously, if that's the good stuff, that means there's also a lot of bad stuff in the game. First off, obviously the community is extremely toxic. Basically, if you're not in the #1 guild on your server, and the top 100 players on your server, yeah, you're gonna have a pretty rough time getting by. There's just so many people who grew like massive egos playing this game, and it's just crazy. And they don't have to play with bad people. Like, that's the thing. Class to race to gender lock ratio is insanely outdated. I don't care what game you're playing, like, unless it's a game that's 100% story driven, like let's say The Last of Us, right? It's like, okay, I get why those characters are locked to male and female, right? But in a game like an MMO where you're supposed to have a lot of creativity, gender locking it and making it like, you can't play an elf unless you want to be an elf archer, and you have to be a female elf archer. It's like, oh god, bro, why do this? If you're on the fence about playing Tarisland, just know it is worth giving it a shot, especially if you have some free time, since the game is free. But as of right now, Tarisland is a severely mid MMO. It's not very bad, but it's also not very good. So for that reason, I'm going to be rating Tarisland 5 out of 10, and I probably won't continue playing it in the future outside of paying attention to it on YouTube and maybe seeing if the game progresses. Let me know in the comments if you played it and what your experience has been. Are you loving it, hating it, somewhere in between? And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to drop a like, hit the subscribe button, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss more MMO content like this in the future. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. Peace.